What's up, my friends? My name is Davin Youngs, and this is the Becoming Sound podcast. And I say this at the top of every episode, but really grateful to be with you here for this episode in conversation, in connection, and community. I've just come in from outside, and it's January in Chicago, and it really, it really feels like it. It's been pretty brutal, very cold for the first few weeks of 2026, and it's all the more reason for me today to just come inside and cozy in and be with you here. And so I hope wherever it is that you are, that you're warm, or at the very least, comfortable. If you're listening to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and at any point throughout your listen or after your listen, you feel compelled to leave a review, I really appreciate those. And if you want to check out a video version of the podcast, plus some additional writings, you can find me over at becomingsound.substack.com, or you can find a video version of the podcast at my YouTube channel. It's just youtube.com/Davin Youngs, or just look up Becoming Sound Davin Youngs. How y'all doing? Like, how are you feeling right now? As I mentioned, I mean, just on a basic weather perspective, it's been a pretty um, frigid start to the new year, which is normal in many ways. But I also recognize it's been so cold that it makes it pretty hard to be out in the world and be very active, and it's easy to feel sort of isolated. And some folks love to hunker down in the midst of this, but it's still difficult. But then on top of that, the world feels wild right now, especially here in the United States, where we are experiencing a type of um, turmoil that I haven't known in my lifetime. And in many ways, it feels entirely predictable, but it doesn't make it any less painful. So I'm coming into this episode today just wanting to say and share with you that my heart feels tender, and I'm going to imagine that yours does too. And I feel especially, um, let's just say, lost on how to move forward with a lot of things. And that's at the heart of what it is that I want to share with you today. But in particular, what it means to show up in the world right now in the midst of so many folks being treated so unjustly, and so much power being wielded in such problematic ways. And yeah, it just presents a tremendous amount of new challenges that, quite frankly, I don't have any sort of answer for, but they sit at the backdrop of how it is that we're all entering into this new year. And I just want to name that there's a psychic toll for everyone involved. I think for even the folks that might feel some sort of satisfaction amidst the political chaos, the bottom line is dis-ease. Um, However much one might convince themselves that that feels correct or satisfying, it wears away at our ability to be comfortable, to move through the world with a felt sense of safety. And so I'm just naming that to begin with, that a lot of us are coming into these moments with some frustration and some tenderness, and maybe even despair. And so I hope that this episode might be a conversation that will see you exactly where you are in the midst of this, and maybe help you feel connected to the fact that you're not alone. And that in addition to that, there might be practices and ways that you can pull yourself um, away from the magnetism of cynicism and despair and hopelessness. Because even though I fully admit that I have many moments where I'm just not sure how this whole thing works out, I still cling to possibly a naive optimism that humans are wired for good, and in the midst of chaos, uh, there is a cohesiveness, there is a connection that's possible, and it's usually best discovered through connection with other people and creativity, new creation. Both of those things are the antithesis of destruction. Creativity is taking the ashes and rising up out of it. And so I want to talk today through the lens of creativity, through the lens of making, through the lens of building a life that feels aligned with your desires for your own flourishing. But I also want to say that feel free to read in metaphorically to anything that I'm saying in a way that it might just sort of apply to how it is that you're moving throughout the world generally, or how people could move throughout the world generally. And I also just want to say, too, that at the heart of the conversation that we're going to have today, the name of the podcast, which you've probably already seen, is What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. But at the heart of that is typically a sense of overwhelm. Maybe not always, but often in these moments, like the moments I'm describing, where it feels like the world's on fire, there's a sense of overwhelm. And I think that what I'd name for you right here at the beginning, and what I want to name for myself, is it's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay to feel like it's a lot or there's too much. It's okay to feel paralyzed by all that's coming at you. I think that there have been many think pieces, there are many thought leaders, there have been many scientists and historians who have spoken about the fact that in the trajectory of human history, what we are privy to knowledge wise right now is so vast, and our fragile little nervous systems aren't necessarily equipped in terms of human evolution to handle all that comes our way on any given day. I mean, you'd be hard pressed not to open your phone, but to meet some sort of tragedy or travesty. And so, if you feel overwhelmed, that would make total sense. And the faster you give yourself the permission to be exactly there, the more efficient your path will be back toward hopefulness, back toward optimism, back toward the type of action that would put you in connection and community. So, what to do when you don't know what to do? I must admit that the origin of this podcast, this phrase at the beginning, it's not mine. And I really, really wish I could credit it to someone, but I have no idea who said it. But years ago, I heard this, I heard someone say this, and it resonated so deeply with me, and it stuck with me and informed so much of how I act in terms of my creative life and my professional life, and even sometimes in my personal interrelational life. But here's the gist of it. When you don't know what to do, when you feel in your heart maybe some level of paralysis or just distinct uncertainty, don't do anything. It's that simple. Don't do anything at all. Now, this is a really strong counter narrative to what you would get so many other places. And I think that's why it resonated with me so deeply. If you know me very well, you know that I excel at hustling. I've become a master hustler in my life, and it's not something I feel proud of, but it's certainly been a part of my narrative for a long time to sort of push through and make things happen and to just keep going. And I think that a lot of times the message that we get in our lives is just take the next step, just take the next step. And I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom in that. And I'm not negating the power of that at any given moment in your own life. I'm not offering this sort of story, mantra, or narrative as a permission slip to give up. This is. I hope you hear at the heart of it. It's a hopeful message. It's not a message of despair or just throwing your hands up in the air. But what I think is so powerful about this idea of when you don't know what to do, don't do anything at all, is that it requires a mindful presence and connection to ourselves and to our own well being, which takes me back to what I was saying just a few moments ago about acknowledging the ways in which you might be overwhelmed, acknowledging the ways in which you might not be okay right now or you might be struggling. When you see yourself in that state and you see yourself through that lens of compassion, that mindful awareness of like, it's hard right now, you know, it's January for me where I live. It's cold, it's so cold. Um, and I think about, particularly how in the new year, a lot of people set these resolutions in place. And so many of those resolutions feel counter to the actual natural climate, the natural way of being. But in addition to it just being the dead of winter, like I said, there's a tremendous amount of bad news. And so it would make a lot of sense to feel a little bit overwhelmed. But so often we ignore that because we almost can chastise ourselves. Oh, you can handle this. You got this. And some of that is maybe a positive thing, self-talk in a really positive way. But sometimes it feels like a sort of punishment. You can handle this. Get to it. Just keep moving. Keep going. But it's my experience that that sort of energy, that just taking the next step to take the next step, it doesn't always yield the result that one might hope for. I think about this in terms of a meditative practice. The courageous act of stopping and noticing. And I think about this in terms of it being the origin of every great idea I've ever had in my life. The origin of any action that I'm proud of. Those moments never have come out of me being reactive to any given situation. My reactivity has always yielded, yes, maybe action, and maybe sometimes even okay action, but never the type of action that feels intuitively, creatively, spiritually aligned with my truth and my well-being. It also, I can't say that those moments where I've sort of pushed through I can't reflect on those moments as being tremendously beneficial to others either. They feel like forced moments where maybe I learned a good lesson in the midst of them, but they don't feel, pardon me if this language doesn't resonate with you, but they don't feel divinely guided. And when I started meditating, all the way back in 2014, what I became aware of is how radical it was to stop. To just fucking stop. To stop and to notice, to sit and to listen. When I started meditating and I started stopping, one of the first things that came up for me was how uncomfortable I was. How disappointed I was with certain aspects of my life, how unresolved I felt in certain relationships, how much shame and guilt there was. And at first, that was quite overwhelming to uncover all of that within me. But very quickly after, I became aware that that wasn't new, that those feelings, they hadn't just emerged because I stopped and meditated. They were there all along, and I was continuing to just push through them. I wasn't really being honest with myself around where I was and the ways in which I was struggling, and the ways in which I wasn't thriving, the ways in which I wasn't loving my life. And so part of the practice of stopping was being willing to act radically, to have the courage to be with myself and get to know all of myself, all the cracks and the crevices, and bumping up against the boundaries. And I'm not going to say it was easy, but I can say the result was quite profound. Usually the result was a sort of sadness, mourning, grief, loss, but then a type of clarity that followed that was really significant. And this is what I think so many people in contemporary culture find themselves bumping up against, that the culture, that the society, that all of the forces around you are saying push through, keep going, at the very least distract. Here's one thing I have been thinking that's really important to consider about this. Stopping, not doing, doesn't mean scanning your phone or scrolling your phone. Oh, that's hard, isn't it? It doesn't mean pulling in the typical distractions that you would pull in to ignore your discomfort. This means engaging a practice of being with oneself in an effort to get clear, in an effort to become in deeper alignment with your truth, with your desire to make and to create and to self-express. And so this first simple yet radical act of stopping, it's so profound. I remember a number of years ago, I had this awareness in a moment in my life where I was really uncertain as to how to move forward, particularly with a creative project. And I found myself searching desperately for inspiration, looking to so many other people, looking to so many other sources, whether it be the internet. This is actually a great way in which the internet or social media deceives you. You can convince yourself that by scrolling, you are seeking inspiration. And that might be true, but I guarantee you that you're not going to find it if it's not through mindful awareness. And I guarantee that if you haven't found it in the first hour of your scrolling, you're not going to find it in the second, third, or fourth. But here was my big aha. I had this sort of 360-degree view of myself, desperately seeking information from the outside source that would inspire me, that would really get me into action. And then it hit me. I'm the inspiration. I was looking so hard outside for someone doing what I wanted to do, but I recognized that I was the only one that was going to do it. No one else is doing it. I am the inspiration. But the only way to see that, hear that, understand that would be to stop long enough to just notice, to just notice, to be with myself, to become intimate with the parts of me that are uncomfortable being that. Become intimate with the parts of me that have accumulated so much wisdom from so many other sources that I'm ready to birth a new idea. I'm ready to make something completely new, completely different, to culminate in this sort of expression of that wisdom. That was a really big aha for me. And it was from that moment forward that I actually stopped looking for inspiration. Now, don't get me wrong. There are lots of people, lots of situations, lots of things that inspire me like you would not believe. But I don't actively seek inspiration in the ways in which I used to outside of myself, because I have a practice of going within myself and recognizing that the inspiration is within. But again, this starts with the courageous radical act of stopping. Now, you might engage this through a meditative practice. And that's where I would love to encourage you to begin, because it's so profound. Even if you just sat in silence, without your phone, with no conversation, with no noise, if you sat for a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, maybe if you're more advanced for 30, just sit, stop, notice, listen. But I've got a bunch of other ideas for you too that I think fall into this category that I want to share. But if you stopped listening right here, what I hope you'll remember is the first thing, the wisest thing you could do when you don't know what to do is not react. It might not even be to act, unless the act is stop. Just stop. Now, before they share those ideas, I wanted to also share this realization that happened to me in my meditation practice. Once I got over, I shouldn't say got over, that's not the right word. Once I became familiar with the experience of sitting with my own discomfort, it wasn't so pronounced. In that it was there, but it didn't overwhelm me in the same way it did early on. I saw it. I became friendly with it in a way that welcomed it, but didn't let it take over. You know, Elizabeth Gilbert talks about when you start to identify these crazy feelings that come up, shame, despair, hopelessness, frustration, anger. It's like going on a car trip, and you can ask them to hang out with you. They can be in the back of the car, they can ride in the back seat, but they cannot control the radio station. You get to choose the music. But what happened to me when I started to recognize and be more willing to sit with that discomfort was, in the midst of that would come a lot of joy, some happiness, and get this, good ideas. This often happens to folks when they meditate. They start to have good ideas because in their day-to-day life, they're never or rarely creating enough space for those ideas or that even emotion to infiltrate, to come in. Now, you likely do have this experience or have had this experience in a few ways. One might be in the shower, because although I've seen recently online that now people are finding ways to scroll their phone in the shower, but often you're not on your phone and you're just open to whatever thoughts, feelings, emotions might roll through. Or on a car trip, on a train ride. I used to love to ride the train. I used to have my best ideas on the train before even Wi-Fi was available there. Or on a flight. Again, I love flying, especially when I don't have access to my phone. Some of the best reading, best thinking, best ideas happen there. But when those good ideas came to me in meditation, one of the first things I considered for myself, it's very tempting in that moment to want to get out a piece of paper, stop the whole process, write it down. But I remember when I was young, my mom would say, if you'd have an idea in a conversation and you'd like lose track of thought, my mom would say, if it's worthwhile, it'll come back. And so I kind of approached those good ideas in meditation with that same mentality. If it's a good idea, it'll come back. My mind is finite, but it holds multitudes, and so it'll probably pop back up. But what I recognized in doing so is that letting go of the good idea in that moment of stopping actually was this incredibly powerful experience because it signaled to the universe that I trusted for good ideas to continue to flow through, that I trusted myself as a vessel to be pointed on a really beautiful, spiritually rich, creatively rich path. And so I started to actually kind of get excited when a good idea would come in, a seemingly good idea. We know sometimes we're convinced ideas are good and they don't show up for us in the way in which we might want them to. But when a seemingly good idea would come in and I would actually just watch it float away, I recognized that there was often so much desperation in the way in which I was handling my creative thinking. There was so much grasping and clinging and not expansiveness. And this alerted me to that feeling, the idea of being much more expansive and open to possibilities in my life. So it's sort of a upper level skill maybe to be able to do this. It's like you have to get through level 1 of sitting with your discomfort. Then level 2, when the good ideas start to come in, what happens if you just trust that they'll come back? Okay, but beyond that idea of literally simply stopping, feeling, noticing, allowing, from there are a number of practices that you might be familiar with, that you might engage in your life, but I want to really encourage you to think about systematizing them, making them regular in your week. The first one is one of my absolute favorites, and it's so simple, but go for a walk. Stop what you're doing and go for a walk. If you have the luxury, go for a long walk. And if you're really brave, don't bring any headphones with you. There is so much incredible science and research around the benefits of walking in terms of regulating our nervous systems, allowing for that spaciousness that I'm talking about in our thinking and our minds. And I've just found over the years that it's the perfect type of embodied action that allows for me to have spaciousness of thought. Some of you might like to go swimming, you might like to go bike riding, you might like to go work out. All of those things are awesome too. But there's something about doing something pedestrian, right? Literally just walking. It's not going to require the type of thought that will pull you away from your ability to be open and expand and aware. And then if you're really brave, when you go on your walk without any headphones, without your phone even, could you do that? Don't go into the walk with an intention of thinking. Again, this feels pretty radical and it requires quite a lot of self-discipline, but be wary of walking with the intention of figuring out a problem or coming up with your best next idea or fixing a situation. Go on the walk and see what arises for you. What happens in these situations is something emerges that you couldn't quite imagine. If you go into a situation like that with a specific intention, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but you, in a way, limit your possibilities. You limit what is scope-wise open to you to consider. And so, just like the idea of sitting, stopping, listening, knowing, the more embodied action of walking, moving, being, but again, with the intention of holding spaciousness for what might emerge. That inner wisdom that you possess to come forth, the inner wisdom that you struggle to listen to because you don't create enough space, because you feel the pressure from the outside to always be acting. And when you're not acting, you feel the pressure to be distracting. This is so common. We all suffer from this, myself included. We are either in action mode or we're trying desperately to distract ourselves from the discomfort. I had sort of a humorous experience just yesterday at the barbershop. Um, I'm hesitant to admit, but I will, that I go to the barber weekly because I'm keeping this tight little buzz cut, and it's just one of life's luxuries to me that I really enjoy. But I've always found the barbershop quite fascinating. In some ways, I feel like it's an anthropological study to listen to some of the conversations that happen in there. But the guy who owns the barbershop that I go to, he's very young. He's 27 years old. And he was talking about, he's trying to open another barbershop. And he was talking about his relationship to work. And he was saying that he feels guilty if he's not working. And it made me laugh so hard because he said to this other barber, he's like, so and so. He's like, don't you feel guilty when you're not working? And the barber just goes, well, not guilty. It made me laugh because I was like, yeah, not everyone feels that way. But I do know that so many of us have that instilled within us that if you're not actively pursuing your worth and your value through a capitalistic lens, through achieving, that it is sort of guilt or shame that will arise that drives that action. And all I can say is that eventually that leads to fatigue. It leads to burnout. It leads to unhappiness. And again, in light of that, there's nothing more radical or courageous or brave to do than to stop. And I know that you, in your mind, have all of these reasons that you can't stop. All of these obligations, all of these things that you need to accomplish that other people are depending upon you for. But I will just tell you that what I'm asking of you here is not to give all that up, but it's to catch a glimpse of what are a few minutes like with this in mind. And how might you expand upon that? Because that's exactly what's going to happen. So, first off, stopping, possibly meditating, listening, maybe going for a walk. The next one, which you're really familiar with, and actually these next two are inspired by The Artist's Way, which is the book that many of you are familiar with. But the next one is something like the morning pages. If you're familiar with this morning pages idea from the book The Artist's Way, if you do The Artist's Way, you're encouraged every morning to do this sort of free-form journaling, this free-form writing. And I would offer this as an incredibly powerful tool of what to do when you don't know what to do. To write for the sake of writing. Now, for some people, you might not feel incredibly skillful in your ability to write, and that's really important that you recognize that the intention of this is not to accomplish anything, but it's start to allow the words to form and flow through you, and start to let the space come through with expression. And what emerges out of there will inevitably surprise you. You might find a lot of repetition, you might find some new ideas, you might find yourself rehashing old ideas, but allowing yourself to be expressive of your inner being, your inner life, just for the sake of doing so, and allowing that to be the pathway to discovering the inspiration within. The map that will emerge from that, allowing you to then really understand what would feel aligned in moving forward going next. Now, an alternative to the sitting and writing is to talk to yourself, to use a voice memo, to literally record yourself. I have found this to be incredibly informative in my life, and I actually do this often when I go for walks. Imagine you're having a conversation with your best friend. You just go out and you start talking, and you talk about whatever comes to mind, and you talk about the things that are bothering you, the ways in which you feel overwhelmed. You talk about the fact that you don't know what to do. It's funny, this actually brings up emotion within me because I find it to be such a powerful act of self-care to just allow yourself the space to express. And there's something about the recording function, setting up a voice memo on your phone or however it is that you might record yourself. There's something about the recording function that makes it feel like it has the possibility of connection. Now, I'm not saying that you share these recordings with anyone unless you like to, although I suspect that other people wouldn't be that interested in them. But it's just this idea of allowing yourself to freely express. And then if you want to get really bold, don't hold back in any way, shape, or form. In the writing or in the talking, in the recording, like, what can you say that you normally wouldn't say aloud to another? What can you give yourself permission to say that feels too wild, too crazy, too obscene, too hopeless, too much despair, or too optimistic, too woo-woo, too spiritual, too weird, too strange, too you? What could you give yourself permission to express in those places? I want to say that I'm kind of spoil the ending of the episode, but I'm going to do it now. What I have found is when you engage these practices, if you just give yourself permission to do them, I can't promise you the timeline, but what you will uncover, what you will discover, is what to do next. And you will find your way there with a type of clarity and ease that you could have never discovered through the reactivity of your past, through the forced forward motion, through the just taking the next step while your feet feel like they're thick in mud. Sitting and meditating, going for a walk, writing, free form, free flow expression, talking and recording. Next one is, I'd like to encourage you to be with people. Now, you have to be really strategic about the people you choose in this situation. And this might feel like it has a little bit of a paradoxical element to it in some of the other things that I've said. But what I believe is an underutilized aspect of seeking creative inspiration is spending time with people that you care about and love, or simply people that you're fascinated with. Schedule the coffee with the person who you've been saying for the last couple of years that you should get together. Or consider if there's someone in your community doing something that inspires you, that you find creatively invigorating, maybe not at all in line with what it is that you might hope to do, but who is it that you'd like to just go spend time with? And when you do that, just like the walk, just like the writing, don't go in with an intention of accomplishing anything. Go in with the desire to foster deep connection. There's this magical element of human connection that always brings us back to ourself in a way. And you know this experience. You know what it's like to hang out with a good friend, talk for hours, not even know for sure what you talked about, but somehow walk away feeling more vital, feeling more alive, feeling more at home, feeling more at ease, feeling more optimistic around what might be possible for the future. Our friends, our family members, the people that we love, or the people that inspire us, they are incredible conduits for um, sort of a creative electricity. And again, I think what's so important about this is that you don't go in with the intention of necessarily fostering that, but you go in with the awareness that finding connection is a basic human need and desire that will bring you back to your inner wisdom, to your deeper knowing, to the resources within that you will need, that you'll need to call upon to move forward. And the final one, this again is stolen from The Artist's Way, but I use this all the time and I find it, I don't know, I just find it really, again, seemingly countercultural. But in The Artist's Way, there's this concept called an artist date. And a couple years ago, I taught a singing workshop and I offered a alternative version of the artist date that I call the singer state. But here's at the essence of this. To regularly take yourself to do something that nurtures your inner artist, your inner creative, your inner singer, your inner need to self-express. Now, what so many of us are tempted to do with this invitation is to put ourselves in the way of something that would be accomplishing something. That would feel productive, that would feel um, like you could check a box off your list. But really at the heart of this is, what do you need right now to feel nurtured, to feel cared for? And not in a practical way, not in a rational way. The beautiful thing about caring for and nurturing your inner artist is it's the least practical part of you. It's the most irrational part of you. It's the part of you that seeks joy. It's the part of you that wants desperately to be free and to be wild and to be self-expressed. And so what an artist date or a singer's date or a creative date can look like is really boundless. Some folks might just choose to go to a museum. On Wednesday in the middle of the afternoon, just go to a museum and walk around by yourself. Or go for a walk in the woods. Or go to a show. Now, here's another aspect about this. You got to do it by yourself. You can't do it with other people. This is not something to accomplish with another. This is about you listening to you, tending to your own needs, and following through and supporting yourself in that way, shape, and form. Often I'm inclined to go to a museum. It's something that, especially when I travel, I love to just go by myself and walk around a museum. And there's something about going to a museum in particular where you can't accomplish much. I mean, maybe you could learn about an artist, but it's about really receiving and staying open to the beauty of the art on the walls or the exhibits or the installations or whatever it is that you're viewing. And then, when was the last time you went to a show by yourself? I mean, some of you might do that regularly, but I suspect a lot of us don't do that. And there's something really beautiful about having the singular experience that feeds you, that's for you. A number of years ago, I was in New York for an event, and while I was there, I got last minute tickets to Hadestown, the musical, and I sat like right in the middle of the theater, and I just think about, I can see myself right now. I didn't know anyone around me, and the seats were really small, and my large frame was sort of squished. I just wept throughout the whole thing. And it was so beautiful. And I think about the way in which that show affected me emotionally. I really think it was quite different than how it would have been if I was with other people. There was a freedom that I felt to connect to the most emotional parts of myself, feeding my desire to empathize and sympathize with the characters. And it was a really profound experience for me. Be your artist date, your creative date, it shouldn't be about you creating. So going and painting or going and dancing, you could do those things, but that's not really what we're talking about. We want to think about what would be the thing that would that would charge your battery so that you are more equipped to paint or to dance or Again, doing something that felt totally out of left field in your life that you would never do. Go roller skating. Go to a trampoline park. Go for a walk in the woods. Go for a sit in a sauna. Go for an ice plunge, a swim in the lake. What are the things that are going to feel outside of the box, kind of radical, but might light you up and might put you in the place of being more equipped to make choices that feel true and feel aligned with who you are and how it is that you want to move forward in the world? Those are the main ideas I've got for you. I've got many more, but I want to leave you with something like a permission slip and take us full circle with what I began with today. It's okay if you don't know what to do next. So much of how the self-help, the creative space speaks is about inspiration and passion, and those things are so important. But sometimes we're not in a position in our lives where we can connect with that freely, and I want you to know that that's okay. I certainly have seasons, sometimes extended seasons, where that feels true in my life, that I'm having a really difficult time being in connection with how to move forward. But you're likely also like me in that you can probably recall, even if there's just one or two moments where you felt super inspired. In fact, that inspiration was so great that you were able to enact change in that moment, that you were able to really figure out a plan for getting the train on the tracks, getting it moving. And like I said, all of the research and all of my personal experience points toward those moments being much more likely in moments of quiet, in moments of ease and a felt sense of safety, in a knowing of oneself that allows you to drum up a certain type of courage to act radically. And this is countercultural. It's a cultural narrative to say, before you do anything, stop. 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 You don't have to keep going. You don't have to push through. Everyone will tell you that's the brave thing to do. But especially now, in the midst of a tumultuous time in human history, in the midst of being inundated with so much bad news, one of the most kind and compassionate, caring things you could do for your creative, expressive self is to stop, to listen, to notice, to be open to understanding, to be open to possibility. And then when the inspiration hits, when you are able to linger there long enough to really hear, to really feel that embodied sensation of this, yes, this, that's when you will act. That's when you will act. That's when you will act. Don't stop and scroll your phone. I know it's tempting. Don't stop and clean your house and do a bunch of paperwork. You might need to do that before you stop, if you're that type of person. This isn't that. This is a full period stop. And then go for a walk. Do some writing. Send yourself a voice memo. Go on an artist date, creative date. Connect with friends, people you love. And I promise, without question, you will feel like you're on a much better path. You will feel at the very least like you're pointed in the right direction. And when that inspiration hits, you're going to be ready to go. Take good care, my friends. I'm here for you. I know we're all here for each other. Stay in connection with me. You can find me on social media, particularly Instagram at Davin Youngs. Love to hear from you. Love to hear your story. If this episode resonates with you and you'd like to share it with others, please do. But until next time, peace.